Hello, and welcome to the Metro MLS webinar for the My Production Report in FlexMLS. In this webinar, we will review the My Production Report located under Statistics and how to read it. So we'll get started. Before we review the report, just in case if you need more detail than this video offers, we do have a training guide available for this on our homepage, metromls.com. Hover your mouse over Member Support and go into FlexMLS Manuals. Scroll to the bottom. It's under the Statistics section, My Production Report. This is a PDF copy that you can print or just save to your desktop if you'd like. Alright, so coming back over. So how we access the My Production Report is we'll click on your menu button, and then underneath the Statistics section, we'll click on My Production. So this report shows you year-to-date data. So it's starting from January 1st to today's date and comparing it to that same time period for the previous year. So when you first come into the My Production Report, it's showing you the quick view, just basic things here. So my report won't really be as fleshed out as if it was a real agent, as I'm using a test account here. Alright, so as you can see, it's separating the year-to-date units and year-to-date volume. So the first section is the units. That's these four columns that you see right here. So it's giving you information for the total number of listings sold for this year, last year, the differences between the first year and the last year, and the percentage of last year's business. So this year, for example, total sold, it's 231 listings. Last year at the same time was 128 listings. So the difference between the 2 years is 103. So doing pretty well, 180% of last year's business. Here, listed and sold, these are your double pops where you're on both sides of the transaction, the list side and the sold side. So this year I didn't have any. Last year I had one. That's a -1 difference, and then I'm 0 on percentage of last year's business. Co-opted listed where you're on the listing side. This year's, last year's, the difference in the percentage. And co-opted sold where you're on the selling side of the transaction. Those numbers for this year's, last year's, the difference between the years and the percentage of the business from last year. So the number of brand new listings, new list numbers, that's what that is. So this year, so far I've had 19. Last year I had 67. There's a difference of 48, so I'm only at 28% of last year's business. And this chart right here is the same data, but just showing you a chart. This is the numbers translated in a chart here. All right, and you can see there's your key down there. The darker year is last year and the lighter year is this year. So next, that same data, but using the volume. So the volume of my total sold for this year is this number that you see right here, over 51,000. Last year is less than that, as you can see. This is the difference between the 2 years and the percentage of last year's volume. Next, again, listed and sold, that's your double pops. All right, this year's, last year's, the difference in the percentage. Where you're on the listing side, the co-opted listed, this year's volume, last year's volume, the difference between the 2 years and the percentage of last year's business. And the co-opted sold, again, where you're on the selling side of the transaction, this year's volume, last year's volume, the difference, and the percentage of business. And then new, so this is the new volume. So those 19 listings of this year add up to this volume. This is last year's, the difference between the 2 years, and the percentage of last year's business. And again, this chart here represents the volume. For here, current status is showing me the number of active listings, units and volumes I currently have, which is none, the number of currently pending listings, and withdrawn listings. So that's what this little chart here means. So this is the quick view. You can change this view to a more detailed view using the member year-to-date report. So this is still covering the same date range, January 1st until today's date, and comparing it to the same period last year. So coming here, it's showing you this first chart is of your active listings. What you have currently, the units, the listing side, the volume, the average list price, the median list price, the average days on market, the average price change, and that price change in percentage converted to percentage, the number of extended listings, and the number of back on market listings. So you get for current, that's for you, office, that's within your office with the percentage there, and then for the MLS as a whole and the percentage. Moving on down, there's the next chart is for new listings using the same data plus some more. So in addition to that same data, give units, listing side, the list volume, the average list price, the median list price, the average days on market, average price change, and that price change and converted to percentage, the number of extended listings, the number of back on market listings, the number of units sold, the number of sides sold, the list price volume based on sold, the sold price volume, the sold to list ratio, the sold to original list price ratio, the average list based on sold, the median list, of the sold, the average sold price, median sold price, average days on market for the sold, average price change for the sold, and that same number but converted to percentage. So you get it for this year for yourself, last year, the change, the difference, and that difference in percentage for your office and for the MLS as a whole. Moving down, the same data but for sold listings. Here the columns are a little bit different here. So it's showing the number that you listed and sold. This is the double pop. You're listed only, you're on the listing side, sold only on the selling side, the total year to date, your last year's year to date, the change, the difference between the 2 years, and in percentage for your office and for the MLS. Next is for pending listings, listings that you currently are having a pending status, showing you the units, the sides, the volume, the average list, median list, average days on market, average price change and converted in percentage, the number of extended and back on market. So this is listed by you, listed by someone else, the total pended for your office, data for your office, and then data for the MLS. Next is for withdrawn listings, currently withdrawn for yourself, for your office, and for the MLS. Canceled, this will always be 0. Our MLS does not use canceled. And then lastly is the same data but for the expired listings. So this report gives you a lot more detail on the year to date. So again, you can switch those between the quick view, just a brief view there of some basics, and your member year to date report. The dates cannot be edited in this screen. So when you come in, if it's the next day, it's from January 1st to the day that you're looking at it. So you cannot edit dates in this screen. If you like to print the data that you see on the screen, you've got a print button. Advanced allows you to detach the window like this in case you wanted to look at both of those at the same time without closing out the window. Does that. And you can also export the data in the table to a CSV file if you'd like to. So again, this is called the My Production Report. We access this report by clicking on Menu, and underneath Statistics, clicked on My Production. This will conclude our webinar for My Production in Flex MLS.